every now and then, one of these rivalry games that does not need any extra sauce. They don't need any extra storylines. Sometimes we get a little extra sauce on it anyway. And LSU, Florida, just a little bit extra sauce this year. I think this game means a little bit more than just, one game in the division or conference standings in the SEC. I call them game pluses because the significance level is that of a normal game, and then there's a little bit of plus. So this is a game plus situation this year. I'm going to ask you a question, whether you're watching live, and if you are, we appreciate it. Like the video, by the way, or whether you're watching the replay. Still like the video, if you will. I want you to answer the question I'm about to ask in a second or less. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, okay? So just play along with me. Are you confident in the future of LSU football? All right, remember that answer. Second question, are you confident in the future of Florida football? Now, record both answers. I think we got a lot of no's there. Or at the very least, we got a lot of crooked neck, and then the buzzer sounded, and you didn't get it in within a second. If we remove LSU and Florida fans from the equation, and we just talk about, as we call them again, agnostic fans, you don't have a rooting interest either way, but you watch the games because these are big programs, I think we got a lot of no's for varying reasons. Maybe you were turned off by the way Florida ended their year last year. Same way with LSU throughout the entire season. Maybe some of the off-the-field rumors have you a little bit concerned. Whatever the case may be, LSU and Florida fans are not stupid. You look at it and you say, oh, look at them, man. They don't even see it. I'm a Tennessee fan or I'm an Arkansas fan. I can look at those programs and I can tell choppy waters ahead. Maybe, maybe not. LSU and Florida fans, they're not dumb. It's not like they can't see the past, okay? LSU fans look back at 2020 and they were more than a little aggravated at how things played out. Florida fans, you think they were happy with the way 2020 ended? They see it just like you and I do. The difference is they believe in their heart of hearts that the past is the past and the worst is in the rearview mirror. And the only difference between the pessimist and the LSU and Florida fan on average is the pessimist is going to look and say, you're a little bit too close, you're loving your program to death, and you don't get what history tells you. History tells us at least one of y'all is going to be wrong. Maybe both fan bases are going to be wrong. But certainly it's not just going to magically turn around for both of you. Well, that's why we play the games, is the point. It doesn't do a whole lot of good to talk about it this year, but the reason I wanted to circle this game is because it's really hard for me to envision both fan bases being right. So I don't know who it is that's going to be wrong. I think someone's going to be wrong. So you couldn't drop this game into a better spot. Again, they play it every year, but I want you to think about the ramifications this year. Think about the uncertainty outside of those programs, and in some cases inside the programs. Think about the redemption that could happen for one of these programs, using this game as a springboard in all likelihood. But I want you to think about where this falls too. Week 7, in and of itself, is going to be a dynamite week in the SEC. It is October 16th. This game's going to be what everything else revolves around. Florida at LSU. But it headlines, I think, the most underrated week in the SEC. You've got Bama at Mississippi State, and you may think, big deal. Well, Bama's coming off the A&M game. Mississippi State's off a bye. So that gets a little interesting. You've got Kentucky at Georgia, big schedule dynamic situation there. Georgia coming off the Auburn game. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin return to Tennessee. I don't think I need to add anything more there. And also Texas A&M, right after playing Alabama, they go play Missouri on the road. So there are a lot of games that aren't going to grab the national spotlight that are going to be really, really intriguing that week in and of themselves. But then you got this game, in all likelihood, parked at 3:30 in the afternoon on CBS Eastern Time, Florida at LSU. For LSU, where will they be at that point? Because that's all this is about. If they're both undefeated, that's just wonderful, that's great, and no one's season is getting wrecked. Is that likely? I don't think it's likely. It's possible it's not likely. For LSU, you know they open against UCLA. They go to Mississippi State a couple of weeks later. They've also got Auburn in Death Valley, and they go to Kentucky. The reason I list those games is because those are the games they will either be a single-digit or a very small double-digit favorite in. You would call them losable games. Technically, every game's losable. Those are more losable than the other games. So here's where LSU is at this point. They're either blemished or they have started to steamroll teams, and they are firmly in the college football playoff conversation. Now, if they're blemished, then this game becomes back against the wall, wounded animal mode. We got to win it because we know that we've still got to play Alabama, so we want that Bama game to mean something. And we cannot be playing Bama already with 2 conference losses. But if they're undefeated when Florida comes in there, that means quarterback has worked itself out. That means the chemistry in the locker room has worked itself out. That means both of these coordinator hires have been home runs, and all of a sudden they're probably favored at that point significantly over Florida. And you're asking yourself then, if LSU gets over this last really big hurdle, are we going to see undefeated LSU and undefeated Florida or undefeated Alabama in a couple weeks in Tuscaloosa? That's the talk that would start to happen. If, however, they do have a loss, then it's all of a sudden do or die mode. That's how quickly that game can hinge. But for Florida, it's a little bit different road than it is for LSU. LSU will be favored, I believe, in every game up until they play Florida. Florida will not be favored in every game before they play LSU. And the reason is because Alabama goes into Florida in week 3. So they get Bama in there in week 3. I don't think that's the game that's going to tell us the most about Florida leading up to this LSU game, though, because they're going to be a 2-touchdown underdog at home against Alabama. You lose that game, it's not the end of the world. Now, if they win it, it's an entirely different video. So let's just assume for a second the odds, the chalk holds, and Alabama finds a way to win at Florida. Well, if that happens, okay, big deal. Bama's going to beat a lot of really good teams. It's the games versus Tennessee and at Kentucky for Florida that will really tell the tale as to how much this game's going to mean. And I don't mention the other games. They play Florida Atlantic and South Florida. If they lose those games, it's also an entirely different video. They lose either one of those, it's outright catastrophe down there. But with the Tennessee game and the Kentucky game, you see the schedule here if you're watching on YouTube. Florida will be between a 14 and a 21 point favorite in both of those games. And how they perform there, maybe coming off a loss against Alabama, tells you everything you need to know this year. Because if they trip up against one of those, then we've got a surefire situation because they're already a 2-loss team minimum going into LSU where they will be an underdog, and then could be a 3-loss team by the time they play Georgia minimum. So obviously things have gone off the rails if that happens. But if they lose to Alabama, but then they pick things up and they beat Tennessee, they beat Kentucky, beat Vanderbilt, well, all of a sudden you go into LSU, you're a 1-loss team, and you've got a very manageable situation here. You couldn't ask for anything more. And like we said last week, if Florida finds a way to split the Bama and LSU games and they take care of business the rest of the way, then you see what lies ahead on October 30th. It would mean the East is still on the line in Jacksonville. That's what this LSU game is probably going to mean for Florida. Number one, it means a lot in and of itself because it's a big rivalry game. But number two, in all likelihood, we're finding out if the East will indeed be on the line or if Georgia has some cushion already built in before they even get on the bus and show up down there. So this is fun because some of these games just carry a story in and of themselves, but then there are other times where you have all these extra contributing factors of what you're saying or what you're thinking about coaches or teams, what happened last year. You remember this game last year. I wasn't even going to mention this. And then I was out in the, whatever we're calling that area out there, the office with Colin before the show, and he said, oh, we're talking about the shoe game tonight. Here's how involved this game is this year. I didn't even think about the shoe throw last year. That's how deep this one goes this year. The shoe throw was like 9th on the list of prioritization of what I wanted to talk about. So you got the shoes and you got everything else. It's going to be a really good game this year. Can't wait. That is week 7. If you want to, go check your helmet grid schedule, week 7. Because even outside of Florida LSU, there's a whole lot to like. And there are games that are not going to be on anyone's preseason top 10 radar of must-see games of the year. But that week 7, just watch out because that could be one that upends some things in the SEC.